Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This video is all about seeding. We actually did one of the 5-Minute Friday videos a few weeks ago about materials that we use for seeding. So it was a video just about gathering up, ordering seed in trays and anything you might need associated with seeding. So hopefully you're ready to go on seeding. It is for us, our average last frost date sometime in mid-April, and we base our seeding on that. We'll talk about that in this video. So I did a video maybe 7 years ago on our light rack inside the house, and the technique that we use is very controlled. Okay, and there's Holly's well in the video here. Is very controlled with a light rack inside the house, and there are lots of other techniques that are initially less expensive, although I will make some argument that the light rack has become less expensive in time because it's exactly the same as when I built it, and it cost a little bit of money, but we've now used it. I was doing the math this morning, 17 times, 17 different spring and fall seasons since that light rack was built. So every single time, I don't have any additional cost in it. But there is winter sowing techniques where you can sow in milk jugs outside, and all different kinds of ways to do this. You can find the technique that fits for you, but I would say that we really like starting our own seed. I like to be in control of it, but the main thing that I really like is the selection. So if we go to a store, go to a garden center, which we will buy things at our local garden centers, and we'll make actual trips that will be on the channel for places that we've been to buy plants during the season, starter plants. But the main thing we love from seeding is that there's so much more selection. If I go and shop for tomato seed, there are literally hundreds of different tomatoes that are available to me from seed. They're all equally the same, pretty much, starting them from seed. And if I go to a store to buy tomatoes, it's going to be whatever it's going to be, 10, 12 varieties potentially. Maybe there's a place that is near you that potentially has more. But for the most part, your selection is gigantic. Which is kind of fun for us because it really allows us, another thing it allows us is to really rotate our seasonal color and vegetables on a year-to-year basis. I've talked about in videos in the past where we tend to grow maybe 6 to 8 tomatoes a year. We keep 3 of them year over year, and then we come up with 3 or 4 that we've never grown before for the following year just for fun. You know, some of them turn out okay, and some of them are not that great to us. But it's still a fun process of changing over the beds and changing the color and changing the vegetables on a year-to-year basis. And that's really one of the main draws to starting our own seed here, other than the fact that obviously it's less expensive as well. I said already our average last frost date here in Raleigh is around April 15th. This is easy to look up. You can just put your zip code in Google and average last frost date or whatever town you live in or whatever, and find this information out. Again, ours is right around April 15th. And when you buy your seed packets, hopefully they have this piece of information on them. Not all do. They have a time to transplant on the back of the seed packet. So hopefully some companies have a lot of information on the back of them, and some have, virtually none, very little information on them. But what we'd like to do is go through and group our seeds based on how much time it takes from putting a seed into a tray or into your milk jug or into your whatever you're starting it in, okay? How long it takes from that seed going in there to be a transplantable size, meaning it'll have enough roots in here that I can pull it out and plant it into the ground, okay? What we're trying not to do is have them in these trays so long that they end up stretching, or we have to repeatedly fertilize them, or because they're crowded in this tray. They're too close together, and so they're going to race each other for light. So what we want to do is get them to the optimum transplantable size and get them in the ground as fast as possible before they start to have some sort of nutrient deficiency issues that we can't control in these little teeny tiny cells that they're living in, okay? Holly is in the camera right now. There she is right there. She was actually pumping the camera to say, hello, I'm here. Okay, so Steph, what Steph has gone through on our seeds for this year, and what we do every year is we just group them by how long each of them take to be transplantable size. The group that I'm holding in my hand is the 4 to 6 week group. Okay, and it includes an agastache, here zinnias, several different zinnias. Let's see, lots of zinnias, some basil, and euphorbia that are in the polka dot plant that are in the 4 to 6. These are things that take 4 to 6 weeks. So we just back up from April 15th and go back 4 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks if you know, or we could do 5 weeks. We could split the difference and go 5 weeks back from April 15th. And we should have most of these things up to snuff. And then she'll actually write down here at the bottom how many actual seeds she's going to use. So in this case, she only wants 5 plants on this agastache, so she wrote 5 on here. This tray happens to be 5 this way and 12 that way, or yeah, 5 that way and 10 that way. So she's just going to do 1 row of that particular one, just to remind herself. So that's the planning that goes into this, right? Is that, you know, each of these 3 to 4 week, there's a 6 to 10 week group, that kind of thing. So right now we're 8 weeks back, and so we're doing the longest things. That includes some of the perennials, potatoes. Oh, and there's actually a 12 to 13 group. A lot of the perennials take longer. We take one additional step other than putting them in groupings for the amount of time they take to be a transplantable size and how many are going to go in each tray. Then also look up each individual seed and make sure there's not some additional step that you need to know. So, you know, Steph's gone through and made a list here of a couple of things that may be of interest on the various seeds that we have. One thing may be that some of them need to be pre-soaked before they go into the tray. So they might go into just a wet paper towel overnight, may be the instructions. They may need cold stratification, at which point they may go into some sort of paper towel in a plastic bag and go in the refrigerator for some period of time. Not a lot of seeds like that, but there are seeds out there like that. So if you get something in, read the back of the packet, and then maybe take the additional step of seeing if there's something out there that makes that would make it slightly more successful than just throwing it directly in the tray. Okay, it may increase the germination percentage at that point. One other thing is we don't start seed from things that are like row crop things or really fast germinating or really fast to sprout seeds. So we're not doing corn in these trays. We're not doing cucumbers you can put directly in the ground. Some of these things are much fat. You can start them from seed in your trays, but it's much fat. They're so easy just going in the ground. And then there's some you just shouldn't start like this, which is the root crops. So things like beets and carrots, anything that forms some sort of taproot under the ground, because it will deform in these trays. So those things need to be direct seeded as well. In the 5 Minute Friday video, we talked about the soil, what soils to use or not to use. I like to use some sort of soil that allows wicking. I use a solid tray on the bottom of this. This is 2 trays, and the bottom one is solid because I don't want water getting on the electrical stuff in the house. And if we use a peat mix or something that allows for some up-wicking, a sterile seed starting mix is overall the best thing to use for sure. We can water from the bottom of these trays, okay, and then wick the water up. Initially, that may not work all that well because they dry these soils out so much now. It used to be when we sold peat moss at the garden centers or some of these materials, they would dry them, but they wouldn't dry them down to the point where there's literally 0 moisture in them, and you could re-wet them pretty easy if they had a little bit of moisture in them. They dry them so much now for shipping cost that the soil's very hydrophobic, and you can add a wetting agent to that. You can buy a wetting agent to add to your soil that will allow it to get wetter easier, to take up water easier. For us, what we do is we'll put the water down at the bottom of the tray, and then we'll spray some gently over the top water as well. And then once we get it moist, it will lift water from the bottom. But initially, it just doesn't want to. It doesn't want to take any water, period, just because they dry it down so much now. When we put the seed, when we're seeding out in the trays, we don't really need any fertilizer initially. We're trying to keep the cells. One of the things about watering from the bottom and having it wick up is we don't end up keeping the top of the cell super, super wet. We want the seed up here on the top to root down into the moisture and not be sitting in the moisture. You will get, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues you could get by using outdoor soils and bringing those in and using those for seeding, disease issues. And then there's damping off issues that you can get from keeping this way too wet. It needs to be moist, but you really, really don't want it all that wet. If you find that there's extra water in the bottom of your trays, it's probably best to take that out and dump that extra water, you know, outside and allow them to drain down. You just, again, you're trying to keep it moist and not wet. Steph will pre-make all the tags as well that we're going to use in the trays. And I mean, we're in this tray, there's 10 rows. We're not doing a 50 tomatoes of the same kind. We're gonna do 10 of one and then 5 of one and then 5 of that Agastache. So, you know, these tags need to be, you know, on one end facing some direction that makes sense to you. And so that they're marked well. It's really easy to forget here what you've put in here. Like if you do 2 or 3 things in a row, again, it'll be very easy to forget. And once the tags are separated from the plants, it's pretty much done for the season. Beyond some special instruction where you need to cold stratify it or pre-germinate it in a paper towel or something like that, you know, read the fine details on how deep the seed needs to go when it's planted. Typically, it's 2 to 3 times the width of the seed. And these seeds are pretty small, so most of them require barely being covered, but a lot actually just go right on top of the soil. So that's an important piece of information to know. A lot of the seed now is pelleted. They run it through a process. They basically, and I've been up to, I've seen this in operation where they basically take the seed that's, you know, from whatever this is, Agastache or coneflowers or tomatoes or whatever it is, and they throw it into a drum and they put various powders over the top of it to make a thick round, turn it into a little round ball. It's the literal way that they make M&Ms, that they take and make and layer M&Ms over, you know, and basically those seed, they turn these teeny tiny seeds into these round balls that allow mechanical planters to plant them. Okay, so that a machine can come over the top and just put 50 seeds in that tray, or whatever size the tray is, 300 or whatever. So it allows for some mechanical operation. Well, those seeds end up in these packets as well, and most of those coated seeds are just, you sit them right on top of the soil, maybe just firm them down in place, but you'll read that on the packet. We typically do 2 to 3 seeds per cell, and then we'll thin them down later with a small pair of pruners down to 1 vigorous one. But some of the seed packs come with 10 seeds. And so we, you know, bronze torch tomatoes, one of our favorite tomatoes, and there's typically 10 seeds in that packet, and we want 10 plants. So we'll plant 1 in each. Hopefully we get 9 out of that, but typically we'll plant a few more. Another one thing that can really, this amaranth has 5,000 seeds in this packet, and it is really super easy to cause yourself problems. This little, it's a packet within a packet. And so where this packet over here has 25 seeds in it or less, this one has 5,000. If you spill this somewhere, you will end up with this throughout all of your seedlings. We've actually made this mistake before. So be super, super careful when you get these types of seeds to lay them out on some sort of white plate or, you know, very small amount, and figure out a way to make sure you're only putting 1 or 2 or 3 seeds in each cell and that they don't end up all over the place. It's another argument about not top watering, because if I go in here and I just pour water over the top of this and these seeds are sitting on top, they'll just wash to another cell and you'll end up having them over here as well. Again, we use a light rack in the house. I like the control of it. When I initially put this tray in there, we have the light pretty close to the top of the tray, and then we have, you can go back and look at that video. I'll link it at the very end of this video, building that light rack. We can raise up the lights as the plants germinate and start to grow, and we still keep the lights really, really close to them. They really like 12 hours on and 12 hours off, is what I've always found. That's my best case scenario. So you can put a timer on it, and there's a timer listed in that video as well. If you go back and look at that, that'll turn your lights on and off. You can, again, there's lots of other techniques for this. You know, the milk jug winter sowing technique outside that a lot of people use. Some people will try to start things in windows, although not had a lot of success starting things, you know, in windows inside the house. But I like this controlled method. again, it's an initial investment, but once you have it, they're pretty industrial. I don't really find that I need any additional heat. I don't need heat. I've never used heat mats or anything like that for any of these, flower and vegetable seeds that we start in the house. So I don't really, this is all the materials I need, and we're using these rigid trays that we can reuse over and over again. When the seed initially germinates, so I still haven't talked about fertilizer, because everybody wants to fertilize things. How can I fertilize them and make them grow faster? These seeds have everything they need. When the seed germinates, you'll get those cotyledons, those leaf-like looking structure on the plant that looks similar on a lot of the plants before they get those first true leaves. But everything that seed needed was already there to produce that first little bit. There's a seed starting playlist on the channel. If you go over to the main HortTube channel, all the videos I've ever done on this channel have gone into playlist. And so if it's seed starting you're interested in, or plant propagation you're interested in, or native plants that you're interested in, they've all been put into playlist over time. So you can go and look at those individual playlists. Because I have a playlist where with the seed starting, where we've started specific tomatoes, peppers, anything specific. This video is more kind of a summary of our steps that we're going through to get going on the seed, how deep we're going to plant them, and how we're organized and all of these kinds of things, because it's time for us to get started, okay, on this. Once your seed germinate in the trays, we'll typically, right as they're first starting to get those first true leaves, we'll use fish emulsion or some sort of organic liquid fertilizer that we can mix into the water when we're doing our watering. So it's a small amount of fertilizer to really start to get them going. The fish emulsion has a smell, so just keep in mind you are going to use the fish. The fish emulsion works great, but we do have our light rack in a spare bedroom in the house, and so it smells temporarily when you use it for a day or so. So keep that in mind. We want to keep these, again, moist but not wet. That is the key. That's really the key. If you want successful seeding, and I don't care what level you're doing it, commercially or for your home use, controlling the amount of water you have on your seedlings is the most important to keep fungal issues and damping off and other issues. So we're watering from the bottom. After you'll see the color change in the soil. It will be a light color when it's dry, and it'll be a much darker color when it's moist. When you re-water and you can see the top moisten again, if there's any water left in that bottom tray, make sure you dump that tray out so there's not excess water in it. That's the main control. And then again, we're fertilizing probably once a week once that gets started. Once the seedlings are up and they all have some true leaves on them, and if we've put 2 or 3 seeds in any of these trays, we'll come in here with a very small pair of snips and just select down to the most vigorous one. Okay, so you believe it or not, if you have 3 seedlings in one is going to stand out as the winner, as the clear winner, and we'll just cut the other 2 out at that time. They can be divided if you want to. So if you wanted to very gently or delicately get in here and divide them, you can. Sometimes when you get greedy on something, you kill all 3, trying to get 3. But it's possible. It is possible to separate them if you want to do that. It's also, some people will seed into just an open tray as well, and then literally divide each one. That is actually another technique that you could use. I would worry a bit if it wasn't all the same thing in that tray about having them mixed up at that point. The next big thing, so if you put your seeds in there and you give them light, and then you give them a little fertilizer after they're up, and you don't overwater them, the last step for success is getting them outside, out into the sunlight. So despite the fact that my light rack is very bright, it's plenty bright enough to grow these plants inside and get some vigor on them, it's not the sun. Okay, and that transition from inside to outside can kill your plants or burn your plants or set them back in some way. So I would recommend bringing them outside, not at noon on an 80-degree day, because we'll get some 80-degree days by April, 75-degree days. Sun's higher in the sky at that point than it is this time of year in February, and it can burn them. So we can bring them out early in the morning or late in the afternoon for a few hours at a time, put them under some light shade, and just transition them over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, whatever, out into the full sun, because all of these things pretty much that we're growing from seed are for full sun. So again, careful with the transition, because you will have done all this work, all this seed starting, building a light rack, doing your milk jug thing outside, done all of these things, and then you throw them out in the full sun, you burn them. It's not a very fun experience, and I've done that. I've had plants shipped to me in boxes across the country to my nursery, and just in the period of time they were in those boxes, they had lost their ability to withstand full sun. And I took the trays out, put them in full sun, and burned them, you know, something that had been shipped across country. So keep that in mind. That's the last step, you know, for success. And then hopefully you've done, we'll have other videos prepping the vegetable garden and prepping our annual beds and getting those things ready for these things to go in so we can have success during the rest of the season. A couple other things I'm thinking of as I'm wrapping this video up. Number one, we do use a nursery marker. The ink on these nursery markers will hold up in the sun and hold up in the watering and everything else we're going to do during the season. If you use some sort of other pen, a lot of times they will, the ink will disappear over the course of the season, and by the end of the season it's just back to a blank plastic tag. We have all of these nursery tags and they're ones that we've reused repeatedly, because I had the nursery in the garden center, and I literally had like 2 boxes of these when we left. There was 1,000 in each box. So we continue to have them, but you can use all kinds of things for this. You can use blinds from you know, an old blind from a window, plastic blinds, and cut those up, or lots of different things you can use for this. Plastic bottles and all kinds of things, but the ink does matter. You know, the ink that you use to write on them is the thing that actually matters. The other thing is, some of our perennials that take longer overall, it may be actually best to put these through another size before they end up going in the ground. So these are 50 cell trays. This root mass is about like this, you know, this deep and like this big around. Some of these perennials would probably benefit from having maybe 4 or 6 weeks in another container, slightly larger container, before they transition into the ground. That way they're in really a larger size, larger root mass, that kind of thing. So we'll show that in video content later. A lot of the perennials that we're starting will go through not being planted directly in the ground. They'll go through some sort of container stage on their way to the ground. So thanks for watching.